Hi Year 12s, this one is going to be officially your last new piece of content for the year before your exam. So we're continuing on with the PowerPoint on human impact on biodiversity, and we're going to be looking at climate change. So, climate change is a natural phenomenon. Normally occurs over hundreds to thousands of years. It's just naturally the Earth will increase in temperature. Unfortunately, since the rise of humans, and we looked in the last PowerPoint, and the predicted 8 billion by 2025, humans have accelerated the rate of climate change. And we've done that through a number of different ways. We've done that through combusting of fossil fuels, which increases the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide. Cement production. So whenever we manufacture cement, that entire process produces carbon dioxide, which again increases the greenhouse gases. Through deforestation, so as we talked about in the last PowerPoint, removing forests, rainforests, trees to make way for human developments. Trees obviously take in carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen, so they're removing carbon from the atmosphere. But if we take away those trees, we're not really increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we're just reducing the amount that's removed. So it still increases the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Agriculture, so animals like cows and sheep produce a large amount of methane. Methane is another greenhouse gas, helps up and accelerates that climate change. And waste as well. We're throwing away lots of waste into landfills and dumps, and when it's there, anaerobically respires, which creates methane in landfills, and again, methane is a greenhouse gas. So just 5 possible ways that humans have been increasing the rate of climate change. Climate change has a number of different consequences. So the fact that we're increasing climate change, or the rate of climate change as a population, means that we are seeing increased consequences because of climate change. Some of the consequences that we're seeing, and the ones we're going to look at, all because of the change in global temperature or carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. First off, we have change in flowering times. Now, if flowers are being grown at different times, that means the pollination is happening at different times, which is going to impact the species diversity on Earth. Bird migration. Because of the warmer temperatures, birds are migrating at different times or earlier than they usually would, which leads to increased competition, predation, basically selection pressures, which are going to have an impact on their bird survival. With increased temperatures, the ice that we have in the ocean and on land are starting to melt at a faster rate. Melting at a faster rate increases sea levels. Increased sea levels cause species that are living near the coastline to have to move, or unfortunately they will die out. Obviously as well, the oceans are absorbing a lot of the increased temperature, meaning the oceans overall are increasing in temperature. Warmer water generally leads to bleaching of coral reefs. When the coral reef bleaches, it starts the process of dying, which again is going to reduce the biodiversity, because lots of coral reefs are homes to many marine species. With the increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, a lot of that carbon dioxide is absorbed into the water. We know that when something has more carbon dioxide in it, it becomes more acidic, hence why fizzy drinks are more acidic. If you've got more acidic water, lots of food chains are going to be disrupted, different species start to die out. Increased temperatures leads to drought, so all of a sudden the amount of water that's available is evaporating faster, which is going to impact the growth of plants. Plants aren't going to grow as large as they once would have. And lastly, warmer temperatures just generally lead to faster growths of bacteria, algae, etc., which leads to disease, which causes deaths and alters food chains. So lots of consequences of climate change, and with climate change increasing, obviously those consequences are going to rise as well. So what ways that we can stop that? Well, conservation is a way that we can stop that. So conservation is basically when we maintain habitat, species, or genotypes of a certain geographical location. It's important to note that humans do have an ethical obligation to prevent species extinction. Therefore, humans have an ethical obligation to ensure that conservation is taking place. There are 3 main reasons why conservation is important. So we have ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity. Ecosystem diversity is basically the fact that we have to maintain the number of habitats that we have and the diversity of the habitats we have. Doing so prevents the extinction of lots of different species because we're maintaining the sources of food as well as the shelter for all species that live in those habitats. Why is it important to protect the species diversity? We know when we looked at food chains and food webs from year 9 to year 11 that a food web is more sustainable than a food chain. If there is a change in a food chain, the entire food chain will often collapse. If there's a change in an extensive food web, the food web can bounce back. So by having larger diversity in species and more species around in an ecosystem, that ecosystem has a greater chance of survival. Which also leads to genetic diversity. We have to ensure that there's a large genetic diversity in populations, because as we looked at in the last few PowerPoints of this topic, populations that have that greater genetic diversity continue to produce healthy and fertile offspring. When they're healthy and fertile offspring, they're going to resist disease and all of the selection pressures due to environmental conditions that they may face. So we need to make sure that we're looking after the ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity. There are 4 main principles of conservation. So whenever we say conservation needs to take place, we need to ensure that we are protecting habitats, minimizing the pollution that we are releasing into the environment, using our resources responsibly, and protecting all of the native species or species that are around us.